Lennox Lewis was built to intimidate. 6'5", heavyweight power, Olympic pedigree, and a mind that treated boxing like a controlled experiment. When he walked to the ring, opponents usually felt fear long before the first bell. His presence alone suggested order, discipline, and an ending that could be calculated in advance. But fear does not disappear at the top of heavyweight boxing. It changes shape. Among champions, fear is not panic or hesitation. It is awareness. It is the quiet understanding that one mistake can erase years of discipline, belts, and reputation. Lennox Lewis understood that truth in a way few champions ever did, because he had already lived through it. He had already been knocked out cold. He had already felt the moment when control vanished and the world went dark. That experience reshaped everything. From that point forward, Lewis did not simply ask who he could beat. He asked who could undo him. Boxing fans often confuse confidence with invincibility, but Lennox Lewis never made that mistake. He knew that power could betray you, timing could fail you, and strategy could collapse in a single second if the wrong man was standing across the ring. What made Lewis dangerous was not arrogance, but calculation. He studied threats the way others studied opponents. He respected danger in all its forms. And when he sensed something he could not fully control, something that did not obey logic or preparation, he felt fear, real fear. Not fear of pain, but fear of chaos. Fear of losing command of the fight and being forced into a battle that no plan could contain. Some men carried power so heavy that one clean punch could end a night instantly. Others brought pressure that could suffocate rhythm and discipline round after round. And a few possessed something even more unsettling: the ability to absorb everything Lennox Lewis threw at them and continue walking forward without breaking. Years later, when the belts were gone and the noise had faded, Lennox Lewis finally acknowledged what many never expected him to admit. There were fighters he did not just respect. There were fighters he was genuinely afraid of. 5 men who represented real danger. 5 opponents who threatened not just his titles, but his control, his legacy, and his sense of dominance. And these are the 5 fighters Lennox Lewis feared the most. Lennox Lewis did not grow up believing in chaos. His boxing identity was built on structure. From his Olympic gold medal to his rise through the professional ranks, Lewis trusted preparation, distance, and control. He believed that if a fight was planned correctly, it could be managed from the opening bell to the final round. For years, that belief served him well. Then reality intervened. The knockout loss to Oliver McCall shattered the illusion that discipline alone was enough. It was not a long war. It was not a gradual breakdown. It was sudden, violent, and unforgiving. One moment, Lewis was in control. The next, he was unconscious on the canvas. Later, the loss to Hasim Rahman reinforced the same lesson in an even crueler way. A single lapse, a single punch, and the heavyweight champion of the world was gone. Those defeats did not weaken Lennox Lewis. They educated him. He understood something many champions never truly accept. Heavyweight boxing does not forgive arrogance. It does not reward assumptions. And it does not care how prepared you think you are. From that point on, Lewis became more cautious, not less dangerous. He stopped treating opponents as obstacles and started viewing them as threats with specific tools: power, pressure, durability, unpredictability. He learned to ask a darker question before every fight. Not how he would win, but how he could lose. This shift changed everything. Lewis became selective. He delayed certain matchups. He avoided unnecessary risks, not because he lacked courage, but because he understood the cost of being wrong. Fear became part of his strategy, a warning system, a signal that demanded respect. By the time he reached his prime as an undisputed champion, Lennox Lewis was no longer fighting to prove he was the best. He was fighting to protect control. And the men he feared the most were the ones who threatened to take that control away from him completely. Number 5. George Foreman. George Foreman was not a problem you solved with strategy. He was a problem your body recognized before your mind could explain it. Even late in his career, even when his movements slowed, Foreman carried something that terrified heavyweights on a primal level. His power did not fade. It waited. Lennox Lewis understood that better than most. He knew that Foreman did not need speed, combinations, or rhythm. He needed one moment, one opening. One punch that landed with the full weight of a man who had spent decades perfecting destruction. Against Foreman, there was no such thing as a safe round. There was only time spent surviving. What made Foreman especially frightening to Lewis was the way his power ignored logic. Fighters could dominate him for minutes, sometimes entire rounds, and still end up unconscious on the canvas. Foreman did not chase knockouts. He allowed them to arrive. That patience made him dangerous in a way that did not show up on scorecards. Lewis was a champion who relied on control, distance, timing, command of space. Foreman threatened all of that with a single swing. He could lose every technical exchange and still win the fight. That reality forced Lennox Lewis into a mindset he hated. Absolute vigilance. No lapses, no moments of comfort. Against Foreman, relaxation was a luxury that could get you killed. There was also the psychological weight of Foreman's reputation. Heavyweights grew up hearing stories about men who never recovered after facing him. Careers shortened, confidence erased. Even when Foreman was older, even when critics questioned his relevance, fighters still respected him because his punches sounded different. They landed with a finality that did not invite discussion. Lewis knew that if he ever faced Foreman, the fight would not be about proving superiority. It would be about escaping danger long enough to impose structure, and structure was fragile against a man who could break bones with glancing blows. One misjudged step, one mistimed jab, and the entire fight could turn into a survival exercise. What frightened Lewis most was not the idea of losing on points or being outworked. It was the idea of being erased in a single moment, despite doing everything right. Foreman represented the kind of risk that could not be trained away. You could prepare for him perfectly and still pay the price. In the end, George Foreman was not a fear rooted in doubt. He was a fear rooted in inevitability, the understanding that some power cannot be neutralized, only avoided long enough to escape it. For Lennox Lewis, Foreman was a reminder that heavyweight boxing is never fully under control, no matter how disciplined the champion believes himself to be. Number 4. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was not frightening because of what he did over 12 rounds. He was frightening because of what he could do before a fight ever settled into rhythm. For Lennox Lewis, Tyson represented chaos in its purest form. No structure, no patience. Just pressure, speed, and violence arriving all at once. Lewis understood boxing as a system. Jab, distance, control, adjustments. Tyson did not care about systems. At his peak, he shattered them. He closed distance faster than heavyweights were supposed to. He attacked angles that training could not fully prepare for. And once he got inside, everything Lennox Lewis relied on became fragile. What Lewis feared was not Tyson's reputation, it was timing. Tyson did not need to win rounds, he needed seconds. One early exchange, one missed step, one jab thrown half a beat too slow, and the fight could be over before Lewis ever established command. Against Tyson, the first minute mattered more than the next 10 rounds. There was also the psychological weight Tyson brought into the ring. Fighters did not just face him, they endured him. The stare, the silence, the sense that the fight had already begun during the walk to the ring. Lewis, disciplined and composed, was not immune to that pressure. He knew that Tyson could force mistakes not through skill alone, but through intimidation and momentum. Lewis also recognized something uncomfortable. Tyson thrived in disorder. The more chaotic a fight became, the more dangerous Tyson was. That meant Lewis had to fight perfectly early, without hesitation, without warmth, without letting the fight breathe. Perfection, under immediate threat, is exhausting, and exhaustion breeds mistakes. Timing mattered too. Lewis knew there were versions of Mike Tyson that were less dangerous, and there were versions that were lethal. Prime Tyson was a storm you did not wait out. You survived it or you fell to it. That knowledge lingered for years, shaping how Lewis viewed the matchup long before it ever became reality. What made Tyson truly frightening to Lennox Lewis was the idea of losing control before intelligence could take over. Tyson did not beat you by outthinking you. He beat you by denying you the chance to think at all. That was the nightmare. Not a long war, a sudden ending. In the end, Lewis did defeat Tyson. But fear is not erased by victory alone. It is born from understanding what could have gone wrong. And for Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson represented the kind of danger that could end a legacy before it ever had time to defend itself. Number 3. Oliver McCall. Oliver McCall was not a theory. He was not a hypothetical danger. He was proof. For Lennox Lewis, McCall represented the one thing every heavyweight fears but rarely admits, the moment when control is taken away, not imagined, but experienced. When McCall knocked Lennox Lewis out, it did more than end a fight. It rewrote a belief. Lewis did not lose on points. He did not fade late. He was stopped cold. One punch, clean and undeniable, and the image of Lennox Lewis as an untouchable champion was shattered in front of the world. That kind of loss does not disappear with time. It settles in. It becomes a reference point in every future fight. Lewis could train harder, prepare better, sharpen his discipline, but he could never erase the memory of how quickly it had ended. McCall was the man who had already done what others only threatened to do. What made McCall especially frightening was his mentality. He did not respect reputation. He did not freeze under pressure. He walked forward with a flat expression and a refusal to acknowledge hierarchy. Against Lewis, he was not overawed. He was calm, steady, and patient, waiting for the opening that would change everything. Even years later, when Lewis defeated McCall in a rematch, the fear did not vanish. That second fight was not about dominance. It was about closure. McCall's breakdown in the ring did not rewrite the past. The scar remained. Lewis had learned that night that perfection is fragile, and confidence can be taken without warning. McCall haunted Lewis because he represented the most dangerous truth in heavyweight boxing. You do not need to be the best man in the ring to win. You need one moment where the other man is human. McCall found that moment, and he exploited it without hesitation. For Lennox Lewis, McCall was not just an opponent. He was a reminder that no amount of intelligence, size, or preparation can guarantee safety. Once you have been knocked out, you know that it can happen again, and that knowledge never fully leaves you. That is why McCall inspired fear in a way no undefeated challenger ever could. He had already crossed the line. He had already proven that Lennox Lewis could fall. Number 2. Riddick-Bowe. Riddick-Bowe was the fight that never happened, and sometimes the fights you never have are the ones that stay with you the longest. For Lennox Lewis, Bowe represented a danger that could not be measured, tested, or resolved. There was no closure, only unanswered questions. Lewis knew Bowe well. They had history. Lewis had beaten him before, long before the heavyweight titles and the global spotlight. That victory should have settled everything. But professional boxing does not follow amateur logic. Styles evolve, bodies change, confidence mutates. And by the time Bowe reached his prime, he had become a different animal. What troubled Lewis was not Bowe's reputation, it was his physical reality. Bowe was big, strong, and comfortable in close quarters. He liked pressure. He liked leaning, grinding, and turning fights into exhausting exchanges on the inside. That was exactly where Lewis was most vulnerable. Lewis preferred space. Bowe thrived in suffocation. There was also the unpredictability of Bowe's temperament. On his best nights, Bowe could be brilliant. Fluid combinations, heavy hands, and a willingness to take punishment to deliver it back. On those nights, he did not respect danger. He embraced it. And that kind of mindset is unsettling for a champion who depends on structure and control. The absence of their fight only intensified the fear. Without evidence, imagination fills the gap. Lewis could not prove dominance. He could not test his plan. He could only calculate risk. And the calculation was uncomfortable. A fight with Bowe would not be clean. It would not be controlled. It would be violent, physical, and draining in ways that could not be predicted in advance. Publicly, narratives formed. Bowe avoided Lewis. Politics interfered. Opportunities disappeared. But privately, Lewis understood that the danger was real. This was not about ego. It was about survival. A fight with Bowe carried the risk of being dragged into a war that erased precision and punished endurance. Riddick-Bowe frightened Lennox Lewis because he represented the unknown, not a punch that had already landed, not a style that could be solved, but a battle that might have forced Lewis into a version of himself he could not fully control. In boxing, unanswered threats linger, and Bo remained one of the most dangerous unanswered questions of Lennox Lewis's career. Number 1. Vitaly Klitschko. Vitaly Klitschko was the fight that Lennox Lewis won and never forgot. For a champion built on control, that alone says everything. Lewis did not fear losing to Klitschko on the scorecards. He feared something far more unsettling. He feared facing a man he could not break. From the opening bell, nothing went according to plan. Klitschko did not fold under pressure. He did not retreat when hit clean. He absorbed punishment with a calmness that defied expectation. Every time Lewis landed what should have been a discouraging shot, Klitschko answered by stepping forward, eyes clear, breathing steady, posture unshaken. Lewis had faced power before. He had faced pressure. But Klitschko offered something different. Durability without panic. Pain without surrender. It forced Lewis into a deeper mental space than he liked to enter. There was no safe rhythm, no gradual erosion. Every exchange carried resistance. What frightened Lewis was the realization that his usual tools were not working as expected. The jab did not impose distance. The right hand did not establish finality. Klitschko refused to react the way heavyweights were supposed to react. He kept coming, not recklessly, but methodically, as if he had accepted pain as part of the equation. As the rounds passed, Lewis felt control slipping, not because he was losing, but because he could not dictate the terms of engagement. Klitschko was not reading the script, he was writing his own. That is a dangerous place for any champion, especially one whose greatness depends on structure. The fight ended with a cut so severe it stopped the contest. Officially, Lewis won. But psychologically, something else happened. Lewis had been pushed to the edge of his certainty. He had glimpsed a future where dominance was no longer guaranteed. Vitaly Klitschko terrified Lennox Lewis because he represented the next era, bigger, stronger, more resilient, a fighter who could endure everything and keep demanding more. Lewis left the ring victorious, but changed. He understood that the margin was narrowing, that the old methods would soon stop working. It was not the fear of defeat that lingered. It was the fear of exposure. The fear that, against the wrong man at the wrong time, control could disappear forever. Fear did not weaken Lennox Lewis. It refined him. In a sport where denial often ends careers, Lewis chose awareness instead. He understood that heavyweight boxing is not about invincibility. It is about managing danger long enough to leave the ring intact. Each fighter he feared represented a different threat: raw destruction, explosive chaos, psychological trauma, an unfinished war, and finally, a man who could not be broken. Together, they formed a map of the risks that defined Lewis's reign. Not obstacles to overcome, but forces to survive. What separated Lennox Lewis from many champions was his honesty with himself. He did not confuse courage with recklessness. He did not chase fights simply to satisfy narratives. He fought to protect control, knowing that once control is lost, it may never return. That restraint allowed him to adapt, to learn, and to correct his own mistakes when others repeated theirs. Fear gave Lewis clarity. It forced discipline. It demanded respect. And it reminded him that greatness in heavyweight boxing is measured not only by knockouts and belts, but by longevity and judgment. He did not need to fight every monster to prove his worth. He needed to outlast them. When Lennox Lewis walked away from boxing, he did so as a complete champion, not undefeated, not untouched, but fully aware of the cost of every decision he had made. The men he feared did not define him by defeating him. They defined him by sharpening his survival instincts. In the end, Lennox Lewis's legacy is not the absence of fear, it is the mastery of it. He understood something every great heavyweight eventually learns. Fear is not the enemy, ignorance is. And in a division built on consequences, that knowledge is what allowed Lennox Lewis to leave the ring with his legacy intact.